reconnected with my ex at a wedding and didn't push him away. My husband saw it all. Hey, Reddit, after giving it a lot of thought, I've decided that I can't just keep everything bottled up anymore. I used to be that strong, independent woman, but just one mistake I made has made me so weak, vulnerable, and useless that I can't even look at myself in the mirror without thinking about what I've done, the one I've hurt, and the people I've let down. My parents, who used to be so loving and supporting, won't talk to me anymore. The man who used to adore me won't even take my calls or open my emails. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I'm still stunned at how it has ruined everything. I don't function properly anymore. I've been making so many mistakes at the office that my boss had to send me home for a week. I'm not sure I even have the guts to walk back in there. Because everyone knows. They were all there and witnessed the whole scandal when it was still brewing. And to think that it was just one messy night that ruined everything. I used to live a very stable life. I had a good job, a loving husband who would literally kill for me. I couldn't have asked for more. And I didn't. It all just kind of happened. I didn't expect my ex to show up. He'd left town since, forever. But he just had to be there at that exact moment and ruin everything. A coworker and close friend of my husband's had invited my husband and I for his wedding. But my husband was out of town for business for a while, I think about 2 weeks. He traveled out for business very often, but he didn't usually stay that long, maybe just 2 to 3 days. I was hoping he'd come for the wedding since it was his good friend getting married, but he told me he couldn't make it. But he had just a few more deals to close up and would be back the day after. I wanted to agree to that and not complain, but the truth is I missed him. I missed him so much. My heart missed him, my soul missed him, and my body just missed having another skin making contact with it. Whenever he traveled out like that and I felt horny, I would masturbate with the sex toys we had at home. That didn't feel very weird because even when my husband was around, we used it just to make things interesting. And whenever we talked over the phone, I would tell him I couldn't hold it in any longer, and so I took care of business myself. He would just laugh and tell me he'd try to be back home as soon as possible, so I didn't have to use them alone. But around the time of the wedding, I just felt different. It was like my body couldn't wait any longer. And when I called to ask him if he was coming for the wedding and he said he couldn't make it, something in me just burst. Combined with everything I was feeling inside, I couldn't help but get really mad at him. I yelled about how he left me all alone, with no companionship whatsoever, and couldn't even skip a day to attend his own friend's wedding. I also added that he knew too well that I was using the wedding as an excuse to just see him again, even if it was once, and yet he chose not to notice my efforts. He yelled back that I was acting like he traveled out for pleasure, or like I didn't know that he also missed me like crazy and wanted to be with me. Then he told me to grow up and stop acting like a baby. That's what even pissed me off the most. I told him I was tired and wanted a break from us. He didn't say anything, just said okay and hung up. But who does that? We were married, not dating. I didn't know people took breaks in marriage. I just said it, hoping he'd say we didn't have to, and beg me to calm down. But instead, he did that. I went back to my routine of using a dildo for the rest of the week, which was like just 2 days before the wedding. And my husband didn't text me, nor did he call, not even once. And I knew I told him we were on a break, but I didn't want to do anything stupid that may end up jeopardizing what we had. But then again, that day my hormones were at the peak. I could fuck a tree in that moment so far as it would get the job done. I tried to reduce the level of horniness I was feeling, and I managed to suppress it a bit. But I knew, and I told myself I'd be careful at the wedding before I find myself fucking the nearest waiter I could find. The ceremony had started, and in fact, it was at its peak when I heard that familiar voice from behind me. I turned, and there he was, my ex, dressed in a really sexy suit and carrying a different haircut from what I knew. He and I were co-workers in the same office I currently work at, but that was way back, like 5 years ago. And my husband and I, been together for 3 years. We'd gotten married just over a year ago. And yes, that was the first ever major fight we'd ever been in. But for the time my ex and I were still working together, we were partially dating. I say partially because it was more of an open relationship, mostly for him than it was for me. He'd flirt around with everyone in the office, the waitress at the bar, the old housekeeper. Basically everyone, male and female. I've caught him flirting with a chauffeur too. Some riz about riding. He was just a playboy. But the reason I felt so special and even stayed was that he always came back to me. He slept with people once, and that was it. He never slept with the same person twice, except for me. When I complained that I didn't like the way he slept around, he said there was just something about me that kept drawing him, and that I wasn't like the rest of the people he slept with. I was special, and the fact that he kept coming back could only mean he was in love with me. But couldn't just imagine not having a variety to himself. He made us have sex more than twice a day, every day. I literally became addicted, and that's something I'm still fighting till now. I'm a sex addict, and that's why I hate it when my husband travels out. Makes me imagine doing really despicable things, because my ex and I could have sex anywhere and with anyone. Most times we'd have a threesome. Those were his favorites. So when he got another job in another state, I knew we couldn't work. I couldn't be so many miles away from him and not be tempted to sleep with the nearest man in a bar. And most importantly, I knew he couldn't pull himself together either. He didn't even try when we were in the same state, so he definitely wasn't going to try out there. We talked about it and made a mutual decision to break up, even though there were still some feelings left. And for the couple years before I met my husband, I was practically a whore, putting the nearest dick I saw into my hole, making out with half the guys at the bar in one night. My life was without direction, very scattered. But then I met him, the true love of my life, my husband, the man that didn't judge me on the first instance we met, despite my stupid attempts to get laid by him that night. The man that didn't just see me as a whole to satisfy his urges and unwavering hormones, but as a person. He said he didn't just want me to sleep with him because I was horny, but because I was led by emotions. We didn't have sex until our 5th date, but I was still getting laid outside. We weren't a thing then, so I think that was allowed. But after we became a couple, I'd never been with another man. He understood how much I loved sex and gave it to me as often as I kissed him. He didn't take it up as an issue or ask me to visit a therapist or anything. He said it was his duty to satisfy any urges I had as his wife. So you can understand why it was so hard for me that he'd stayed away for 2 weeks. I'd never been left untouched for so long since I turned 20. But at the same time, I never cheated before. I had given it a thought, maybe even imagined it, but I knew it wasn't right, and didn't plan on doing it. But when I saw my ex at the wedding, it was like all my walls had been broken down. All my emotions and hormones rose up against me, and against my better judgment, I made the worst mistake of my life. At first, it started with a dance. After talking awkwardly for a while, my ex asked me for a dance. I knew what dancing could do to people and their emotions. I knew I shouldn't have gotten up. I knew it'd bring trouble, and a part of me told me to say no and just remain sitting, or better still, go home. But again, against my own better judgment, I stepped on the dance floor with him. We danced to romantic songs being played, and his hands were tightly wrapped around my waist the whole time. I could feel his skin on mine, despite the thick clothing that was between them. I could hear my heart beating at a ridiculously faster speed than usual. I could hear the voice in my head telling me to run, to get away while I still could. But I knowingly ignored that voice and opened my mouth to take his tongue in when he brought his lips closer. My heart was racing faster than ever. My hands were trembling, and suddenly I felt my husband's judgy eyes staring at me. But it still took me a minute before I could pull out of the kiss. I turned and looked around to see if my husband was there, because I literally felt his presence, and I was never wrong on such things, but I didn't see him. What I saw was a bunch of people staring at me with their own judging eyes. Not a lot of people cared, but those that looked were enough to make me come back to my senses. I ran out of the hall and drove home. I couldn't stop crying. I thought about what I had done, what the people who saw me would think of it, what my husband would think of it if he ever found out. I wanted to tell him when I got back, but I wasn't sure how to start, and I was afraid he'd start looking at me differently. I didn't want that. I just liked the way we were already. I got a call from him when I got home. He said his friend had told him that he saw me leaving the wedding in a rush. I didn't know what to say. My thoughts were, what if he told him about the kiss? But then my husband asked if everything was okay, if I needed assistance of any kind, or if someone was making me feel uncomfortable. There was this urgency in his voice, like he genuinely cared. That's because he knew, even saw, what had happened already. I think he was just trying to make himself believe that I didn't let my ex kiss me, that maybe I was threatened or something. But deep inside, he knew the truth. At the time, however, I didn't know that my husband already knew. I told him I was fine and just felt dizzy at the wedding. He asked me to get some rest, but also told me that his flight was delayed and he'd be coming back 2 days later than expected. I usually would have whined about that, but I was filled with too much guilt to even complain. I just told him it was fine. I noticed him pause a while before saying goodnight, but I brushed it off as nothing. The next morning, I woke up to texts from my ex. I didn't even know how he got my number again, probably from other coworkers at the wedding, because I'd changed my number since the last time we spoke. He said he was in town for the next couple days and wondered if we could have dinner that evening. I ignored the message at first, but after he noticed I'd opened then, he sent me another saying he missed me a lot. For some reason, my stupid heart fluttered. I wanted to say I missed him too, and his touch, and the feel of his lips on mine, and that I couldn't stop thinking about the kiss that night, but I didn't want to give him any ideas. I had barely escaped trouble that night, so I said yes to go to dinner with him, but that was because I wanted us to just clear everything up. The plan was to set him straight, not give him more opportunities. But when I entered the restaurant, I noticed this scanning look he gave me, the way he looked at my bare shoulders and thighs, the way he looked up at my boobs and bit his lip when he bent over to kiss my hand, and I started shivering again. I couldn't believe it was happening. Again, my face turned red, and all my hormones started rising again. I knew it was a bad idea going there, and I wished I hadn't challenged myself like that. I thought I could hold it in through dinner, but I couldn't. The place looked empty. It was almost as if he'd rented the whole thing. So I excused myself and went to the bathroom even before we could start eating, and I took my handbag with me. The moment I entered the bathroom, I brought out the 5-inch emergence dildo I'd brought as backup. I entered one of the stalls and was in such a hurry to release myself that it didn't occur to me to lock the door. I just closed it. I was moaning so loudly, even though I tried to keep it low, that I didn't know when the door opened, and next minute my ex was standing in front of me. I just froze with the dildo halfway into my hole, but he smiled and offered to help. I tried to refuse him, wanted to refuse me, but a part of me was just tired of running away. I knew my desires, so I just thought I could satisfy them and go on with my life. So I let him do it. He tossed the toy to the side and did it naturally. I was always a loud moaner, and he liked that. He didn't try to cover my mouth or anything, and it wasn't until later that I found out he had sort of rented the place for an hour or so. He knew what was going to happen even before I stepped through that door. After having about 3 rounds, I still ended up in his house. I stopped fighting it. I told myself I had already done the inevitable, so there was no use trying to push myself away. Instead, I'd have the most time of my life while he was still in town. He was leaving town a night before my husband was scheduled to return, so I thought it'd be a win-win for everyone. I didn't have to go home to get anything, because it was the weekend and I wasn't staying long. The wedding was on a Friday, dinner was on Saturday, and my ex was going to be gone by Sunday evening. Then I'd return home and wait for my loving husband. That was the plan. But when I realized things weren't going according to plan was when I got home that evening and found my door already unlocked. At first I thought it was a burglar, but the door hadn't been tampered with at all. I went in only to see my husband sitting on the rocking chair in the living room, watching TV. He scared the shit out of me. I started feeling so nervous and nauseous too. I managed to pretend to be surprised that he was home earlier than scheduled. But the truth is I wasn't terrified. I was literally putting on another man's shirt and cologne, which must have filled the air when I walked in. I didn't want to go too close to hug him, as I tried to give myself the benefit of doubt that he may not have caught the strange scent when I got in. So I told myself I would shower, wash every stain of guilt and evidence off, then come back downstairs and properly welcome him. But when I went up into our room, I saw suitcases packed, my suitcases packed. I opened the closest just to confirm, and everything was gone. My drawers were empty. It was like I never lived in that room to begin with. Even the few silly writings on the wall were gone. My husband had completely erased every memory of me. I had to go down and ask him some serious questions. But I turned to the door, and he was already standing there just staring at me, probably enjoying my frustration. He didn't look remorseful at all, or like he had made a mistake. He just looked so certain and casual, like he had just helped me pack for a trip or something. Then I thought, maybe we were actually going on a romantic trip. Maybe he was making up for all the time we lost. Just maybe. But that was so not the case, and deep down, I knew it. That's when my husband confessed that he was there from the onset, at the wedding. He said because of the fight we had and how angry he knew I was, he roughly closed all the deals he had left just so he could be back early and surprise me at the wedding. But in the process of looking for me, he found me, especially expected. But I was with my ex, and he wasn't sure if he should just interrupt like that, because he expected me to be alone. Plus, the conversation looked very intense according to him, and I kept laughing nervously. He said he wasn't sure what to do, and he didn't even know who the guy was. So he asked a coworker of mine that was passing by him, and whoever that was, they told my husband the history between my ex and I. So he just stayed in the shadows, watching to see if I would end the night without making any mistakes with my ex. But the dance was the last straw. He said we looked so into each other, me especially. In his words, I looked like I had just found my long-lost love. And then the kiss. He walked out after that. Decided not to come home that night. Apparently, I had ruined the surprise already. He stayed in a hotel for the 2 nights and went all out to hire a private investigator. According to him, he just wanted to see how far I'd go if given the opportunity, and then determine the kind of punishment I deserved. I was shocked. I didn't know or ever think my husband would be so clever to pull something like that. I couldn't even find the right words. I wasn't even sure what exactly I wanted to say. The look in his eyes was unfamiliar. The way he talked was unfamiliar. It was like he had become a whole new person overnight. Before I could speak, he said my sister was on her way to come pick me up, and that he didn't try my parents because he knew they wouldn't want anything to do with me after they'd heard the story. In a quick moment, I did the math, and that's when it occurred to me that my life was officially over. Almost everything was connected to my husband. For one, the house we lived in was solely in his name. We had the same friend circle. My co-workers and probably my boss were all definitely going to hear about it, and if I'm not careful, I'll soon be penniless too. And I couldn't depend on my ex. He was just a user. He wouldn't even pay me any attention. Not when there were so many other boobs and asses and dicks in Manhattan where he lived. That's when I got on my knees in an attempt to convince my husband to take me back and not let the 2 years we'd spent together go to waste. But he just smiled and said the lawyers would send me divorce papers once we were settled. I sat there on the floor of what used to be our bedroom, crying. My sister came and picked me up, took me to her house, and that's where I've been since.
No.
Work's not going great. As a matter of fact, I'm on an assigned leave, like I said, and I'm not sure I want to walk back there because my news is everywhere. My sister and parents were emailed photos as evidence of my affair with my ex, and since then, my parents have suddenly forgotten I own a phone. They only know how I'm doing through my sister. They've not called even once. I just needed someone else to talk to. And I'm very grateful you guys read this to the end. I don't even have energy to do anything. I've already signed the divorce papers, and it's all over now. I don't have the energy to want to have sex anymore. I find myself masturbating and crying at the same time. It's all just messed up, but I believe I'll get through this, one way or another.